Hi, James Harrison. It's time for Thursday Thoughts. Today we're going to talk about a drummer who played with Chuck Mangione back in the 70s and probably the early 80s and whatnot. James Bradley Jr. Now, obviously, he didn't play everything with James Bradley and Chuck Mangione. Some of the early stuff that I'd heard with Chuck Mangione actually had Steve Gadd playing drums on it. But I'll get to that in a minute. So, being a drummer, but also being in school band, and also being a fan of drum and bugle corps back in the 70s, you couldn't go to any of those areas without coming across some kind of a Chuck Mangione tune. And I'm talking, everybody knows Feels So Good because it became out and became a big hit, but I'm talking prior to that right now. Some tunes I remember playing in high school, one called Hill Where the Lord Hides, can't speak right now, and another one, of course, and it's a live version that the Bridgman Drum and Bugle Corps performed it on the field and whatnot, but it's called the Land of Make-Believe, and I just love that quasi-Latin type tune. You're probably going to hear a dog door, dogs running in and out. They're peeking in right now, and they're seeing me behind the drums, so they're afraid to come in. But anyway, Legend of the One-Eyed Sailor, the Blue Devils, had played for several years, and of course Steve Gadd did an amazing intro on there based on the Crazy Army, what it's called. So I don't know if you want to call it cadence or a little drum solo, whatever, but it's called Crazy Army. And Steve Gadd took that and added some bass drum to it and made it into an intro groove for Legend of the One-Eyed Sailor. So anyway, through all this, I started becoming a fan of Chuck Mangione and purchasing the records and whatnot. And then, of course, Feels So Good did become a hit, and the Children of Sanchez and all these kind of things became very popular recordings, and I really got into it, started buying the albums, of course, and of course the classic Live at the Hollywood Bowl, big double album set that he did with James Bradley Jr. playing drums. I was just floored by it, and the cool thing for me is, James Bradley Jr., to me, he looked like a young kid. Obviously, he wasn't young. Well, he was young, but not as young as I was. But and I really got into it because there was a good blend of the looseness of jazz, and he was kind of like if you took a little bit of jazz, a little bit of funk, a little bit of rock, a little bit of R&B, and mixed them all together in a blender, you'd get James Bradley Jr. And that really came out in his playing, and I just really dug that because, again, I could hear the rock-oriented things in his playing. It wasn't just pure jazz, and I think he was really complimented what was going on with Chuck Mangione and whatnot, and I'm drawing a blank, and I knew I would because I should have thought about this earlier. There's a tune, I think it's called Theme from Side Street, that just has some killer drumming on it. And of course, I think he did one called The 11th Commandment, and of course we all know the Children of Sanchez, drumming on that. And again, so it's kind of like you really are playing, or I guess you could say he was orchestrating drum parts as well as drum set oriented stuff and mixing it together and coming up with all this. So certainly an early influence on me in those years was James Bradley Jr. And I'm friends with him on Facebook, and I cherish that and whatnot. But it's not like we're close friends, but he certainly is a big influence on me, and especially all through those late 70s and early 80s years when to me that's when Chuck Mangione really exploded onto the scene. And again, everything that Chuck Mangione had done prior to that James Bradley Jr. might not have been on, where can't remember the name of the album, but I think Steve Gadd's playing on it. It's a live album. It's orange with they're like in a balloon on the cover or something like that, around the world or something like that. But that's the one with the Land of Make Believe and stuff. But all those tunes were actually done again, quite a few of them on the Live at the Hollywood Bowl album. But the Feel So Good and Children of Sanchez albums were both pinnacle albums for Chuck Mangione. And again, I'm sure a lot of jazz purists didn't like it, but to me, it gravitated and here comes one of the dogs. It gravitated and really connected with me because, again, I felt like I could relate to James Bradley's playing, but again, to me, he was like a perfect blend of seasoning in the music when you take rock elements, funk elements, jazz elements, fusion elements, soul, R&B, drumming, and mix it all together, and that's what he was. So definitely a huge influence on me. So my Thursday thoughts today are James Bradley Jr. Go back and check out his drumming and see what you can of him on YouTube and whatnot. Great drummer. Thanks.